RD and the Arab Federation for Human Rights for organizing this side event on what is a really very important topic today. It is really important to take on this topic, though sensitive and not easy. I speak from the perspective of a citizen of the United States who's been living in Europe for about 15 years and who has been working for international organizations for the past 10 years, with also a lot of work and projects in the Middle East. I intend to set a stage to point in our very short amount of time to point to some of the issues, some of the environment that we are in, and to give a couple of examples of positive responses as an introduction to a conversation among all of us. And my focus will be on actually not the Middle East region, but on the European and North American context in relationship to the Middle East region. So we know of recent attacks in Europe, in Paris, Brussels, Nice. Recently in New York City, on September 11th, there was a Muslim woman wearing traditional dress whose blouse was set on fire. Thankfully, she was able to put it out and she was not injured. On September 11th, in addition, there was violence and fire in a mosque in Florida. Mosques in the United States are feeling a security threat. As just a few examples of what we know in heightened tension. To talk about what is behind the increasing violence and tension that we are feeling around the world, as we know, is multifaceted and nuanced. And it is certainly clear that human rights are in danger. Sectarianism and racism are happening all over the world, and it's not new. Recently in the United States, just as one example of one kind of tension, there's a lot of racial tension between African Americans and Caucasian Americans. There's been a lot of gun violence. There's tension in our world because of the violence and war in the world. And we are aware that extremism and fanaticism has to be analyzed in the context of bigger economic and political issues and interests. There is tension in the world because of changing economies and economic struggles. There is tension because of the felt need for heightened security on the one hand, and protection of civil liberties on the other hand. Here in Switzerland, there's coming up a vote in the direct democracy of Switzerland. There has been a proposal that the police monitor the information, phone calls, emails, to a greater degree than before. And actually, there are human rights groups which are opposing this proposed law on the basis that it infringes upon the human rights of citizens, and that it is it's not a good step to address the security concerns. So it's a very current issue. This will happen on September 22nd here in Switzerland. In the West, There is a tension because of different cultural norms clashing or being perceived as clashing without people really knowing each other very well, each other's cultures or beliefs very well. There is a growing Islamophobia, and there is limited interaction between Christian and Muslim citizens and residents. Young people, many young people are in their separate clusters and groups. There is fear at the root of much of this growing tension and sometimes violence. So we observe isolation and marginalization of different kinds of groups, and it's often based on religion or ethnicity or gender or political identity. There is growing sectarianism within religions in Europe, in North America. We know that migration and the influx of refugees to different parts of the world is making many of these issues more visible, and some of them are growing. There has been limited strategy to receive the growing numbers of migrants and refugees in terms of integration into their host societies and finding ways of people knowing, learning more about and relating to each other, finding jobs, making sure children have the educational opportunities they need, etc. And so it is imperative for concerned people to speak out now and for us together to find initiatives to address this environment that we find ourselves in and to work together. This question of religion, and especially Muslim-Christian dialogue, is something that I've been involved in quite a bit in my work. And I think that to put some kind of attention on helping Muslims and Christians know one another and overcome stereotypes and work together to solve these tensions and problems is one interesting proposal and strategy. So I just want to give you a few thoughts about responses. Of course, we are here at the United Nations, and so on the international stage and in our national contexts, we have to set the legal frameworks and hold people accountable to them for the basic human rights of all people. And in general, I believe more resources need to go into these concerns right now, as it's urgent, into ways of finding in common our humanity and our values in common, finding peaceable ways to live together through what are sometimes difficult differences, and knowing one another, simply, which often solves many problems. One Muslim activist in Florida, in response to the bombing in Florida, said an attack on any house of worship is an attack on all houses of worship, and it's unacceptable. I know personally also pastors in the New York City area and around the country who are working with their communities to stand in solidarity in different ways with their Muslim brothers and sisters. For example, fundraising for the burnt mosques and so on, and in general, trying to find ways of getting their communities together. I know one young Greek Orthodox Christian who has funding from the Greek government to put together a publication to introduce students and young adults to the importance of interconfessional, interreligious, and intercultural dialogue in what he has articulated as times of isolationism, prejudice, hostility, religious violence, and fundamentalism, and the rising of the socio-political extreme right, at least in his part of the world, he says. And the World Council of Churches, I've been involved for the past 4 years in what for them is a 10-year project to bring young adults from the ages of 21 or 2 to 35 every summer from the Abrahamic religions from all over the world to look at specific topics of concern to everybody. For example, this year it was migration, and to share from the different religious perspectives how we can address this common problem together. And in the process, to share many things, eating together, living together. And you know, what struck me very much was that going into this project, into this moment, all of these young adults were concerned with the question of what are we going to do as a follow-up to what we know is going to be an important experience together. So, yes, I'm finishing right now. I think that there are, in fact, many people of goodwill, most people of goodwill around the world, and specifically our young people, who really want to be agents of change and really are capable of it, but somehow are missing a framework or an infrastructure for it. So it would be an interesting question to work on together. How can we organize moments for people and build on them and bring them back to our communities? So there are many troubling signs around, but there are many signs of hope, and I look forward to our continuing conversation. Thank you.